All right, so thank you for joining us today. So the topic of today is to talk about Tocqueville, this French philosopher. And here, as you can see, so I've generated this image to illustrate the idea of this talk. This is, we have reality and we just perceive reality. So this is the image of Plato's cave, if you want, or the veil of Maya. And so you have reality, then Tocqueville has perceived this reality in the US, has analyzed democracy in America in the 18th. And so what we have done in this work is to try to capture his reality, or the reality is perceived, and to build models for representing the thought of this nice guy, right? So we are not just going to create one model, but create multiple models just to be sure. So we know that all models are wrong, but some are useful. So here, the idea is really to generate multiple models to have different views of the thought of Tocqueville, and hopefully have at the end of the day something that represent the thought, right? Sorry, I need to go in the right way. So Stefan already mentioned quickly the workflow that we are using since years now. So obviously at Bayesian we are specialized in Bayesian networks. And so there are now 3 ways to build this graph. So this is either by doing machine learning. So this is why we created Bayesian in 2001. So with lots of different types of machine learning algorithms, so unsupervised learning, supervised learning, clustering, and so on. We can also obviously use expert knowledge for manually creating these graphs, and we can also use brainstorming session for capturing knowledge not only of one expert, but of a group of experts. And now we have also Elixir that can be used for doing what we can call knowledge mining, so extract knowledge that is captured in the large language models, and then go from something that is a kind of black box to something that is understandable, right, and auditable. So we have these 3 sources of information. Obviously, they are not exclusive, so we can use Elixir for helping machine learning, for helping a brainstorming session. We can use expert knowledge for helping machine learning. And at the end of the day, we always need expert knowledge for validating the models, right? Specifically when we are trying to do causal representations. And then once we have the network, so by the network, we can use it for probabilistic inference, and then we can do what we call decision support. So this can be used for simulation when we observe root causes and see the effect on the effects. We can do diagnosis, so observing some effect and then use Bayes theorem in order to update our belief on the root causes. We can use a model for analyzing the domain we are representing. We can use it for optimization, and at the end of the day, since we are dealing with probabilities, we can do very efficiently risk management. So for that, we are usually using BayesiaLab. So this is our flagship product that allows you to directly handle Bayesian networks and do all these different types of inference and optimization. The web simulator is a tool that we can use for sharing the model, so allowing people to use the networks you have designed, for letting them, doing some kind of simulations, and without having to have a license of BayesiaLab, for example. And so now we also have ElixMap since almost a year and a half that allows to really share the qualitative part of the network. So you can build the network within BayesiaLab and then publish it on ElixMap, and then everybody can go to the URL you are sharing and access and explore the network you have designed. So this is really useful for knowledge interpretation. So you can easily visualize even large network. You can explore subpart of the network. And as I said, you can really easily share your graphs with that. And once we have started to develop ElixMap, we have also directly integrated Elixir within ElixMap, and then we are not only able to produce Bayesian network, but we have also a way to generate knowledge graphs, causal semantic diagrams, semantic flowcharts. So we are not only now dealing with directed acyclic graph, but also with any kind of graph, right? So this graph, obviously, you can sometimes go back to BayesiaLab, but when you have something that is not acyclic, obviously, there is no way to directly handle that in BayesiaLab, right? So this is Alexis de Tocqueville, so our hero for today. And so what I've done here, instead of talking about this guy directly, I have generated a knowledge graph that describes Alexis de Tocqueville. So as you can see in this knowledge graph, you have the main node at the very top, that is correspond to Alexis de Tocqueville, so he's a French political thinker, 18th or 19th century, so 1805 to 1859. So he wrote basically 3 books for democracy in America. So this is what we're going to talk today. The Old Regime on the Revolution and Recollections. And so for the democracy in America, he went to America with this friend, Gustave de Beaumont. And they went there for, at the beginning, it was for a study about the penitentiary system, sorry. And so it was supposed to, yes, to analyze this. And at the end of the day, he used this journey for really, analyzing the American democratic system, right? And its implications. So this is, you see, so a knowledge graph, you have these nodes, more or less the same thing as a Bayesian network, but different kind of relationship between the nodes. So this is, so Democracy in America is made of 2 books. It's almost, 1,000 pages. And so we are going to mainly talk about the second book, because the first one is more technical. And here what I want to share with you, so because it's, obviously it was written in French, and it's really a very, very beautiful language, not just French, but the French he used at that time. And so I'm going to show you here, so this is an extract of this volume, the second one, and I'm going to play, so this is a recording of a radio show here in France. So it's going to be played in French, so just to let you hear this very nice prose, but you have obviously the text in English here.
Quand toutes les prérogatives de naissance et de fortune sont détruites, que toutes les professions sont ouvertes à tous et qu'on peut parvenir de soi-même au sommet de chacune d'elles, une carrière immense et aisée semble s'ouvrir devant l'ambition des hommes, et ils se figurent volontiers qu'ils sont appelés à de grandes destinées. Mais c'est là une vue erronée que l'expérience corrige tous les jours. Cette même égalité, qui permet à chaque citoyen de concevoir de vastes espérances, rend tous les citoyens individuellement faibles. Elle limite de tous côtés leurs forces, en même temps qu'elle permet à leur désir de s'étendre. Non seulement ils sont impuissants par eux-mêmes, mais ils trouvent à chaque pas d'immenses obstacles qu'ils n'avaient point aperçus d'abord. Ils ont détruit les privilèges gênants de quelques-uns de leurs semblables. Ils rencontrent la concurrence de tous. La borne a changé de forme plutôt que de place. Lorsque les hommes sont à peu près semblables et suivent une même route, il est bien difficile qu'aucun d'entre eux marche vite et perce à travers la foule uniforme qui l'environne et le presse. Cette opposition constante qui règne entre les instincts que fait naître l'égalité et les moyens qu'elle fournit pour les satisfaire tourmente et fatigue les âmes. On peut concevoir des hommes arrivés à un certain degré de liberté qui les satisfasse entièrement. Ils jouissent alors de leur indépendance sans inquiétude et sans ardeur. Mais les hommes ne fonderont jamais une égalité qui leur suffise.
France Culture.
So I hope you enjoy this nice language. So this is an extract of this second volume, And so when you read the books here, you can really think that this is really, Tocqueville was really a guy, yes, that was managing causality. So in the book, you can, I counted it, so we have 270 occurrences of the word cause and almost 150 occurrences of effect, right? So this is always a comparison between aristocracy and democracy. And then, so when you really, each chapter, at the end of the day, you can think about a causal model behind that. So obviously, since I'm a graph guy, each time I'm reading that, I want to create something that represents what is describing. And so now with Helix Map, it's just not just me drawing the graph manually based on what I'm just understanding, but there is some way to really do that very efficiently, right? So the talk of today is going to be about, the generation of different types of graphs, so semantic network, knowledge graph, and so on, just to try to map or to transform the causal prose into some formal models, right? So this is a very, it's a very small model, so I did it on purpose, very simple, so that corresponds to exactly what you just heard a few minutes ago. So this is a network that captures exactly what was said in the text, right? So we have a node equality of condition that has a causal impact on universal competition. So where you have the description of this relationship, so it's abolishing privileges opens the door to universal competition, as everyone follows the same track. Then this universal competition has an impact on ability to realize goal, and equality of condition has also an impact on the individual ambition. And at the end of the day, you have this individual ambition and the ability to realize goals that interact and that create this mental wariness, right? So this is what has been directly created by analyzing this text. So in blue, you have the positive impact, if you want, and in red, the negative one. And then, so if you play with that, so it has been not only designed, but also quantified, even though, well, obviously here the probabilities are just reflecting the logic, but they are not precisely corresponding to a population. But then, so if you are with equality of condition high, which means democracy versus aristocracy for low, then you have this high universal competition, that then a low ability to realize goal because you have lots of competition, but you have a high individual ambition, and then because of that, you have this high mental wariness, right? So the agenda for today is to start with a semantic network. So I'm going to create a semantic network that that allows me to understand more or less what are the main dimensions of the topic described in Democracy of America. Then we have the knowledge graph, then causal semantic network, semantic flowchart, causal network, risk-centric causal network, and we are going to conclude with Bayesian networks. Even though perhaps if we have more time, I'm going to create additional Bayesian networks. So just as a reminder, because we already saw that in different webinars, but just for those who were not there, so a semantic network is, so it's done in BayesiaLab. It cannot be done in Helix Map because it requires some machine learning. So we are first extracting dimension for really, we are using keywords that are used to identify what are the main concept or the main axes of the domain. Then each keyword is play the role as a kind of lens, if you want, that allows us to sense or to capture a specific facet of the subject. Then we are going to use these keywords for generating embeddings, right? So each extracted dimension is converted into a numerical vector, so that allows to capture, the meaning of the dimension. And then we are using machine learning, so we use the maximum weight spanning tree here for connecting these nodes together, right? So at the end of the day, we are focusing on the strongest correlation that are representing in this domain. So in BayesiaLab, so you can see here Elixia, so the wizard here. So we are just the first part which allows us to describe what is our topic today. So it's a very short prompt if you want. So it's just democracy in America, Alexis de Tocqueville. And then we have at our disposal 169 keywords that have been already selected. And so in order to help people use this feature, we have created some kind of pre-selected group of keywords. And so the one I'm using here is the book analysis set of keywords. So that is made of 10 keywords, so characteristic, concept, contribution, element, ideas, impact, perspective, progression, purpose, and themes, right? So these are the lens I'm using for really understanding the domain that is described by democracy in America, right? So based on that, we end up, so at the end of the day, so we have used these 10 different keywords, and then we have used embedding generation. So this allows us to create a kind of data set, and then we use machine learning for learning this graph. So this is a maximum weight spanning tree graph, if you right? So if I click on this link, so you can also scan this QR code to have also access to the graph if you want. And if I click on it here, I'm going to have access directly to Helix map. And I can then use this interface for exploring this tree, right? So we see, you have different colors. Each color corresponds to a class of node, and a class of node corresponds to a keyword here. So if I go to the navigation panel here, I can go by class first. So I'm going to use this, and then so here, this is the first class of nodes, so that correspond to the characteristics. So these nodes, these dimensions, have been selected by the keyword characteristics. So we have the dual descriptive and prospective dimension, fundamental ambivalence toward democracy, structure in two distinct volumes. So this is two books here. Universal scope for specific case, equality of condition as a generative fact, empirical observation, and comparative methods, right? So this is the first group of nodes. Then we have the concepts that have been associated with this domain, right? So with the free association, decentralization, soft despotism, very important one, equality of condition, obviously very important one too, with the link with democratic individualism, tyranny of the majority, and so on. Then we have the contribution of the work, right? So anticipation of the totalitarian and bureaucratic drift. We have also the modern political sociology. Then if we go to the elements of the book, so we have the book of the domain described in this book. We have the New England towns or townships. We have the federal system on state autonomy. We have the condition of women in democracy, freedom of press, and so on. The ideas, so danger of administrative centralization, intermediate bodies. We have a laboratory, America as a laboratory for Europe future, intellectual conformism in democracy, the impact of the book, right? Impact on understanding the American society, on liberal political theory, and then we have the perspectives. So this is obviously Alexis de Tocqueville was an aristocrat, so it's a liberal aristocratic perspective here, critical and anxious perspective. Then we have the progression, and then we have the purposes of the book, and at the end of the day, the theme that have been covered in this work, right? So equality and liberty, revolution and continuity, religion and democracy, and so on, right? So this is a way to navigate in this graph, just to go via the group of nodes. So here, again, a group of word, a cluster, if you want, is based on the keywords. And we can also go and use a navigation via degrees. So the degree of a node in a graph, this is the number of connection, so incoming connection and outgoing connection. So if I use just degree, we are gonna start with the nodes that have the highest number of connection. We don't care if it's in degree or out degree here, we're using both. So the most connected node in this graph is centralization and decentralization, right? And then the next one is gonna be equality and liberty. Then we have from the American particular to the democratic universal and so on, right? Then we can do in degree or out degree, even though in this kind of graph, I'm not going to do that because it does not make sense since it's not causal. So we don't care if it's incoming or outgoing, right? We are just here focusing on associations. And so here you have this tree. So we already focused on the group of nodes. We have relationships. So what we've done too is to add another layer of interpretation, because we also have associated labels with the links, so just to describe the association if you want. And so this allows you to have a first understanding of the domain, right? Sorry. So this was a semantic network. Now we switch to the utilization of helix map directly. And so in helix map, so it's a tool, as I said, for sharing your graph, right? But it's also a tool that is connected with Helixia, so we can also generate graphs. So we have 3 ways to generate graphs. So the first one is to use an open-ended question. So this is what we are going to do now. We can also, associate documents, and then we can analyze articles or, subset of books or anything, or even a large subset of articles. And the last one is to import. So you can import an XBL file directly via so files that have been created with BayesiaLab, or you can also import JSON files that are compatible with the helix map format. And so if you use the open-ended question and the document analysis, you can generate 5 types of graphs. So knowledge graph, causal semantic diagrams, semantic flowchart, causal network, and risk-centric causal network. So those first 3 ones are not Bayesian networks. The last 2 are Bayesian networks, but if you generate them with the helix map, you are just going to have the qualitative part. So no conditional probability distribution are going to be associated here, right? So just to describe what is a knowledge graph precisely, I have created a knowledge graph, right? So it's a meta knowledge graph, if you will. So a knowledge graph, as you can see here, contains nodes and edges. So it's a structured information representation. And so the nodes represent entities. These entities can be organization, concept of people, or anything like that. And the edges represent semantic relationships, right? So that can be temporal relationship, partitive relationship, causal, spatial, attributive, taxonomic, functional relationships. So you have these different types of relationships. So this is a knowledge graph representing what is a knowledge graph. And then we are going to see later on that we are also creating a semantic flowchart. So a semantic flowchart is a kind of knowledge graph where we are focusing only on the temporal relationships. And we have also the causal semantic diagrams that are knowledge graph where we are focusing on causal relationships only, right? So they are kind of subset of knowledge graphs. So this one is a knowledge graph that corresponds to the open-ended question, the very simple one, democracy in America, Alexis de Tocqueville. So it's using the implicit knowledge of the large language models, so which means that I'm not associating any extract of the book. I'm not giving anything to the LLM, just the topic, democracy in America, Alexis de Tocqueville, right? And this is generating the knowledge graph that capture the domain. So we start with the 2 authors, so Gustave de Beaumont and Alexis de Tocqueville. Well, the 2 went to a journey to America, so there's only 1 author here. So why they went there, so America penitentiary system, so this was formalizing that. We have the township, so perhaps I can switch directly here to helix map. And so we have this, so each time you hover over a link, you have the description of the relationship. So we see township here, so if I hover over this node, I have a precise definition of these dimensions. So units of local government in New England, and Tocqueville analyze a school of freedom and democratic participation. If I double click on this node, township, I'm gonna just focus on the neighborhood of this node, right? So township is connected to New England, so because they are located there. They are illustrate the decentralization and also our schools of liberty, right? And then you have these little icons that are associated with the nodes. So this means that decentralization has one hidden parent and one hidden child here, because since I'm just focusing on the neighborhood, obviously, lots of nodes are hidden. And these little icons are very useful because this allows you to know if it's worthwhile to double click on the node or not, right? So here, it's worthwhile to double click on decentralization because I'm gonna see one additional parent and one additional child. And so decentralization, now you see, you have opposes administrative centralization, obviously. This threatens liberty, right? And this one will preserves liberty. You have the federalism here that implies decentralization and so on. And so I can double click on this one and so on and so forth and explore the graph like that by using this double click that allows me, at the end of the day, when I'm double clicking, it's a shortcut to go to make a right click on neighborhood, where you can define what is the radius you want to use and what is the layout you are going to use to, right? So right now I'm just doing that. So then if we, for example, we double click on Democracy in America, we're going to see that we have the two volumes. So volume 1 and volume 2, so 5 years, difference in between the two books. We have here, so Alexis de Tocqueville was obviously from France, and then he compared, the aristocracy in France and then the democracy in America, right? Then if we double click on volume 1, we're going to see that this is the analysis of the federalisms and also examine the judicial power, right? If we go to volume 2, then we have here the studies of Morris, then we have the analysis of individualism and the anticipation of sub-despotism, right? And then this one has two hidden parents, so sub-despotism here can favor, the centralization can favor sub-despotism and also individualism, right? So we have this graph. So this is a very nice representation of this domain, but with really the seven type of relationships that I have described in the knowledge graph. So quantitative, taxonomic, spatial, and so on, right? So this one is the causal semantic diagram. So as I said, the causal semantic diagram is a kind of subset of a knowledge graph where we focus. So we don't want to have these 7 different types of relationships, but just try to focus on the causal one. So by using the exact same prompt, which means, again, Democracy in America, Alexis de Tocqueville, and instead of choosing a knowledge graph, we choose causal semantic diagram, we have this graph that is created automatically. And as you can see now, we don't have Alexis de Tocqueville, we don't have Gustave de Beaumont either, we don't have the journey in America, because this is not interesting for this causal representation. But we do have aristocracy that has an impact on equality of condition, so it's a negative one. We have the religion that has an impact on the patient for material well-being, so we can again click on this link to get access to the network here. And then we have, if I zoom in, so the freedom of the press, that will form the public opinion, that will facilitate civil and political association, and preserve liberty. If we go to liberty, we can see that we have 5 additional parents. So we have the sub-despotism that will destroy liberty. We have the religion that supports liberty. We have the tyranny of the majority that will threaten liberty, and so on and so forth, right? So this is now more like a causal focus on this domain, okay? If we switch now to the semantic flowchart, again, this is a knowledge graph where we are interested in a kind of, yes, flowchart, as the name indicates, temporal relationships. And then, again, with the same prompt, Democracy in America, Alexis de Tocqueville, we now have again the Alexis de Tocqueville node that will is connected with the voyage to America, then equality of condition, and so on and so forth. So let me open this graph here, and then zoom in. So we have this, obviously, Alexis de Tocqueville went to America, and then is reveals equality of condition, that here arouse passion for equality. Then we produce democratic individualism, founds the sovereignty of people. Then we have this, brings forth freedom of press. And so we have then here, so that we have one risk here, the sub-despotism, that can then demand remedies against the democratic dangers. So this is a very important node here. So this node depends on, so if I click on this one, we have these 7 parents. So religions and morals that feeds the remedies, tyranny that calls for, so this one too. And the local and communal freedom here nourishes the remedy, and so on. So you have this different way to represent this domain. So again, to summarize, so the semantic network, we are using keywords for trying to extract what are the useful dimensions that are associated with this domain, knowledge graphs that start to organize everything. Then the causal semantic diagram, we focus on the causal relationships. This one is more like temporal relationships that can obviously be causal. And then now we are going to switch to really causal Bayesian network, right? So the other one, we have just purely qualitative graphs. So now we have a kind of constraint network. So we are going to see causal network and risk-centric causal network. So if you want, there is one that focuses on the positive aspect of the main criterion, and the risk-centric causal network always focuses on the risk. So it's always that it's going to fail. So this one, it's a democracy that is going to flourish, and for the risk-centric, it's going to be the failure of democracy, right? So, but let's start with the causal network. And again, I'm switching to Helix map. And here we have, so it's something that is created by, we have lots of constraints. So we are looking for a graph, a causal networks that contains different types of nodes. So we have the root causes, right? So absence of an absolutist monarchist tradition, municipal autonomy and decentralization, spread of education and enlightenment, vitality of civic association, and I'm not going to go through the entire list. So these are the root causes for having a flourishing democracy. Then we have the intervention, what we can do for improving the ability to have a flourishing democracy. Then we have the main criterion, so this is our target here. And we also have, in between, before this one, we have the intermediate causes. So these are the result of intervention plus root causes, and also the confounders here, right? So confounders that have an impact usually on the root causes and also on the criterion. And then we have the main criterion here, and at the very end we have the effects, right? So what happens when we have a democracy that is flourishing, right? And again, if I want to focus on this specific intermediate cause, I double click on this node, and I can see that favorable material and geographical condition is defined by the absence of absolutist and monarchist tradition, abundance of land and resources, and economic prosperity and developed commerce, right? And since I have this icon, I also know that there is a parent here, or this one, let's see. So this is a geographical context. So this is, if I click here, details, this is a confounder, right? So this is in pink. And this one has two hidden children. So two intermediate causes here, right? So the absence of absolutist monarchist tradition and abundance of land. Plus, obviously, the target or the main criterion, right? So this is the causal networks that uses these 5 different types of classes and that focus on the positive side of the main criterion, if you will. Oops. Look. Now we switch to the risk-centric causal network, which is also a constraint network. Still, it's a Bayesian network that is meant for, risk analysis. So here our criterion is a decline of democracy, right? It's not democracy flourishing, it's declining, right? And so let me go to Helix map to see this graph. And so here we have different, again, same kind of constraint, different types of groups of nodes or classes. So we have first, since it's a risk-centric causal network, we are starting with the threats. So what are the threats here for the democracy? So it's excessive individualism, tyranny of the majority, instability of laws and legislative fickleness, and so on. Then we have the preventive barrier. So what can be done to prevent, to reduce the risk associated with these threats, right? So these are going to be connected with the sub-risks. So then we have the sub-risks that are mitigated, right? So we have in blue the threats that are increasing, for example, the oppression of minorities here. And in red, you have the barrier that allows you to mitigate this risk, right? Then we have the main risk, and then we have the consequences associated with the mitigating barriers, right? So this is our RCCN type of network. So it's a kind of probabilistic bow tie, if you want. So it's a kind of very useful for risk analysis here. And then, so if we focus same thing on let's say the civic aptitude through materialism here, we can see that so the threat is materialism and love of well-being, and what can be done to mitigate this is a shared economic prosperity, religious spirit and morals, and civil and political associations, right? And these have also hidden children, so which means that they are mitigating other sub-risks, right? So these networks, so the causal one and the risk-centric causal network, I told you that they are Bayesian network, but not quantified, except that they are still a little bit quantified because we have here, you see, the associated with the link, we have the causal effect. So this one, for example, is minus 40. This one is plus 75. So we still have the causal effect so that we can use at the end of the day for going back to BayesiaLab and generating a causal Bayesian network that is not only so the same structure, but then also the probabilities that can be regenerated by using this information. But obviously, you can also directly use BayesiaLab for creating this kind of networks, right? Because Helixia is also integrated in BayesiaLab. And then now we switch to the generation of a Bayesian network. So not one constraint. So because risk-centric and causal network as I mentioned, are based on very specific classes of nodes, so confounders, threads, and so on. So here we just say we are going to build the Bayesian networks that represent the domains that we are interested in. And so this is a network that have been created just again by using the prompt Democracy in America by Alexis de Tocqueville. And we have this network that represents this domain. Same thing, in blue we have the positive effect, red negative effect. So it's not only qualitative, but now we also have, so because this has been done obviously within BayesiaLab, and we have probabilities that are associated with each node, right? So the nodes are not only propositions, so in all the network I've presented before, it was just proposition which means true or false. Here, it's not just true or false. We can have 2, 3, 4, 5 different states, and not necessarily true or false, but with different association, right? And for that, since it starts to be a little bit more complex, I'm going to switch to a prototype here. So right now we are working on helix map to have this directly integrated, but for the moment I'm just using a local version that I have on my laptop. So it's a tool that allows me to create a dashboard on the graph, right? So here you just connect it to helix map, and you say, okay, so this is a Bayesian network that is made of 23 nodes, 36 relationships, 6 types of nodes, and then you have, yes, some kind of basic dashboard with the different, what are the classes, the relation types, and so on. And then we have the nodes, so I can click on the nodes here to access directly to helix map. But again, so I was just playing with the helix map, the internal version a few minutes before the webinar, and we have already this feature implemented, but it's not entirely polished, so I cannot use it right now, but it's gonna be released next week probably. And so here, what I can do, oops, it's not this one. I just have to go here. And we have, so it's not just a dashboard, so you can translate your model, enrich the model, and so on. And we have a chatbot here that allows to understand the model, because I know that people are not all people are at ease with graph, so specifically when you have more than 10 nodes, it starts to be cumbersome. So people can lose interest in this graph. So I tried, within helix map, to have these navigation tools, via classes, via degrees, and via the neighborhood, but still you can be lost in the graph. So the idea now is to use, again, but LLM, but in the other way around, and do some kind of graph rag. So we are feeding the LLM with the graph, and then the LLM will help you to understand the graph, right? So I can, for example, generate the executive summary of the graph, so of the network.
Executive summary.
A causal model of democratic stability and pathology in egalitarian societies, mapping how equality of conditions drives both civic virtues and vices.
Domains covered. Structuring condition, foundational equality that shapes all downstream dynamics, equality of conditions.
Inputs, institutional and cultural. Protective factors, religion, decentralization, freedom of the press, independent judiciary.
So
this is the executive summary, which is very useful, but you can already have it otherwise associated with the comment of the network. And what is really interesting is a navigation guide. So let me perhaps go back to something. No, it's okay. I go, and so navigation guide.
Navigation guide.
This network maps Tocqueville's theory of how equality shapes democratic societies through cascading psychological, institutional, and political effects, revealing both the virtuous spirals that preserve liberty and the vicious cycles that lead to despotism.
Step 1, the foundation, equality of conditions.
What to observe. Begin at the root cause of the entire system.
Equality of conditions is the exogenous structuring condition that triggers all downstream effects in Tocqueville's model.
Explore equality of conditions.
Relationships. Notice that equality of conditions initiates three parallel psychological transformations. It promotes individualism, stimulates materialism, and strengthens conformism.
These form the psychological foundation of democratic society.
Step 2. The psychological spiral, individual passions.
What to observe. Examine how equality triggers contradictory psychological forces in the individual.
These three mores, individualism, materialism, and conformism, are the immediate consequences of democratic equality and shape everything that follows.
Explore individualism, materialism, conformism.
Relationships. All three are direct outputs of equality of conditions.
Critically, individualism and materialism both drive citizens toward civic disengagement, while conformism feeds directly into tyranny of the majority.
This shows the dual threat, withdrawal from public life and suppression of minority thought.
Step 3. The counterweights, institutional and moral inputs.
What to observe. Democracy is not doomed by equality alone.
4 external inputs can moderate or redirect its negative tendencies: religion, decentralization, freedom of the press, and independent judiciary.
Explore religion, decentralization, freedom of the press, independent judiciary.
Relationships. Religion curbs both individualism and materialism and grounds enlightened self-interest.
Decentralization feeds spirit of association and enlightened self-interest, while independent judiciary directly protects against tyranny of the majority.
These inputs represent Tocqueville's practical safeguards against democratic despotism.
Step 4. The critical hub, spirit of association.
What to observe. Identify the central redemptive node in the net.
So I'm going to stop here because otherwise it's a bit long. But you see, so when it's going to be integrated within helix map, you will have directly, each time we will go hover over one node, you will directly focus on the node in the graph, right? So at least I hope it's going to be doable. And so here, so I think it's really cool to have this tool, because then you really understand, even though this one is not that big, but I tested that on network with thousands of nodes, and it's really helpful to have this kind of help to know where to start, what is really important, what matters in the network, right? So this is the Bayesian network that correspond to the democracy in America. And if I go here, so this is, as I said, it's not just qualitative, so it's not just propositions. So for example, for freedom of the press, we have 3 states: censored, controlled, free. We have equality of conditions, the same thing. So either it's aristocratic, or it's in transition, or it's democratic equality. And then so you see these nodes, they all have 3 states. In gray, you have the latent variables that have been created here just to implement some kind of divorce to reduce the size of the conditional probability table to estimates. And so we have here something very, very nice to play with, right? And then we have a web simulator that allows you to really interact with this model and share this. So if, again, I click on this link, then you have the web sim. So if you want, I can go back. So you just scan this QR code and you're going to have access to this model. And then, so you can then play. So in this web simulator, you have, this one is not an adaptive questionnaire, so it's just a simulator. So you have basically 2 parts in this window. So on the left, you have the input. On the right, you have the output. And then, so you can just play with the input and say, what if now we are in a democratic system? So you have the impact on the different nodes that have been selected as being output nodes. You can see the impact of religion. You can see municipal autonomy. You can see here this is, the freedom of the press. It allows you to, it has 2 paths. So it allows you to reduce the risk of having a soft despotism, but also it increases it a little bit because of the tyranny of the majority. So very interesting paradox here. And then you have also the judicial independence. So each time you hover over the node, you you display the comment that is associated with the node, right? You can clear the observation, and in this one, I don't know if I have any observations that are associated, but I don't have here. And in this one, you can have access, you see here with this icon, you have access also to the qualitative parts of what is behind this engine, right? And then, so we still have 5 minutes. So I just wanted to also show something slightly different, where this is not just by using the implicit knowledge of the LLM, but here what I've done is I wanted to analyze what Tocqueville is mentioning about the army and the war. And for that, so I went to section 3 of the second book, so the influence of democracy on manners, properly so called, and then I use 5 chapters, so 22 to 26, sorry. And so it's not a big text because it's just very small chapters at the end of the day here. And then you use these for creating this graph. So now, again, this is really, I have fed the LLM with these 6 chapters. And then this is a network that represents what is said in this chapter. So, right, you have the social state. Again, it's always a comparison between aristocracy and democracy. And then you can see that you have a link, the causal effect with initial military effectiveness, prolonged military effectiveness, the army ambition, the speed of advance in peacetime, and so on. And so then you can play with that again. So you see that in an aristocratic system, the military is initially very effective, which is the contrary for in democracy. The army ambition is limited because it was so the high the general and so on were always coming from the aristocracy. So in democracy, it's not the same thing. You have to earn things. So the speed of advancement is in peacetime was fast. In aristocracy, and in democracy it was slow. So then you have the desire for war in democracy, because in order to advance, you need to have some war, otherwise we are not advancing. And the citizen, they are loving peace in democracy, but not in aristocracy. So you see, you have to. There is a discrepancy between what the army is desiring and what the citizens are desiring in democracy and aristocracy. And so quite interesting network here. And then I did the same thing with section 2 here for analyzing the division of labor. Then this one is, so this, I'm not gonna, I think we just have 2 minutes, so I don't want to spend more time, but here, same thing, you have the QR code here, so if you want to explore these networks, you can do that very easily. So once you're going to have access to the slides here. So let me just go there and just, I have different networks. So just to remind you, the main URL, so ElixMap, just for, having access to the graph. Then you have the simulator, so for playing, for being able to carry out inference with the networks. And that, I think I'm going to thank you for your attention.